They picked 6 men who had reputations as being both practical and theoretical scientists and who were known to have no biased opinions regarding the UFOs. The meeting of the panel, which would be held in Washington, was tentatively scheduled for late December or early January, depending upon when all of the scientists who had been asked to attend would be free. At Project Blue Book, activity went into high gear as we made preparations for the meeting. But before we were very far along, our preparations were temporarily sidetracked. I got a lead on the facts behind a rumor. Normally, we didn't pay attention to rumors, but this one was in a different class. Ever since the Air Force had become interested in UFO reports, the comment of those who had been requested to look them over and give a professional opinion was that we lacked the type of data you could get your teeth into. In even our best reports, we had to rely upon what someone had seen. I'd been told many times that if we had even one piece of information that was substantiated by some kind of recorded proof, a set of cinetheodolite movies of a UFO, a spectrum photograph, or any other kind of instrumented data that one could sit down and study, we would have no difficulty getting almost any scientist in the world interested in actively helping us find the answer to the UFO riddle. The rumor that caused me to temporarily halt our preparations for the high-level conference involved data that we might be able to get our teeth into. This is the way it went. In the fall of 1949, at some unspecified place in the United States, a group of scientists had set up equipment to measure background radiation that is always present in our atmosphere. This natural radiation varies to a certain degree, but will never increase by any appreciable amount unless there is a good reason. According to the rumor, 2 of the scientists at the unnamed place were watching the equipment one day when, for no apparent reason, a sudden increase of radiation was indicated. The radiation remained high for a few seconds, then dropped back to normal. The increase over normal was not sufficient to be dangerous, but it definitely was unusual. All indications pointed to equipment malfunction as the most probable explanation. A quick check revealed no obvious trouble with the gear, and the 2 scientists were about to start a more detailed check when a 3rd member of the radiation crew came rushing into the lab. Before they could tell the newcomer about the unexplained radiation they had just picked up, he blurted out a story of his own. He had driven to a nearby town, and on his return trip, as he approached the research lab, something in the sky suddenly caught his eye. High in the cloudless blue, he saw 3 silvery objects moving in a V formation. They appeared to be spherical in shape, but he wasn't sure. The first fact that hit him was that the objects were traveling too fast to be conventional aircraft. He jammed on the brakes, stopped his car, and shut off the engine. No sound. All he could hear was the quiet whir of a generator in the research lab. In a few seconds, the objects had disappeared from sight. After the first 2 scientists had briefed their excited colleague on the unusual radiation they had detected, the 3 men asked each other the $64 question. Was there any connection between the 2 incidents? Had the UFOs caused the excessive radiation? They checked the time. Knowing almost exactly when the instruments had registered the increased radiation, they checked on how long it took to drive to the lab from the point where the 3 silver objects had been seen. The times correlated within a minute or 2. The 3 men proceeded to check their radiation equipment thoroughly. Nothing was wrong. The rumor stopped here. Nothing that I or anyone else on Project Blue Book could find out shed any further light on the source of the story. People associated with the projects, similar to the research lab that was mentioned in the rumor, were sought out and questioned. Many of them had heard the story, but no one could add any new details. The three unknown scientists at the unnamed lab in an unknown part of the United States might as well never have existed. Maybe they hadn't. Almost a year after I had first heard the UFO radiation story, I got a long-distance call from a friend on the West Coast. I had seen him several months before, at which time I told him about this curious rumor and expressed my wish to find out how authentic it was. Now, on the phone, he told me he had just been in contact with two people he knew, and they had the whole story. He said they would be in Los Angeles the following night and would like very much to talk to me. I hated to fly clear to the West Coast on what might be a wild goose chase, but I did. I couldn't afford to run the risk of losing an opportunity to turn that old recurrent rumor into fact. 20 hours later, I met the two people at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. We talked for several hours that night, and I got the details on the rumor and a lot more that I hadn't bargained for. Both of my informants were physicists working for the Atomic Energy Commission and were recognized in their fields. They wanted no publicity, and I promised them that they would get none. One of the men knew all the details behind the rumor and did most of the talking. To keep my promise of no publicity, I'll call him the scientist. The rumor version of the UFO radiation story that had been kicking around in Air Force and scientific circles for so long had been correct in detail, but it was by no means complete. The scientist said that after the initial sighting had taken place, word was spread at the research lab that the next time the instruments registered abnormal amounts of radiation, some of the personnel were to go outside immediately and look for some object in the sky. About 3 weeks after the first incident, a repetition did occur. While excessive radiation was registered on the instruments in the lab, a lone dark object was seen streaking across the sky. Again, the instruments were checked, but, as before, no malfunction was found. After this second sighting, according to the scientist, an investigation was started at the laboratory. The people who made the visual observation weren't sure that the object they had seen couldn't have been an airplane. Someone thought that perhaps some type of radar equipment in the airplane, if that's what the object was, might have affected the radiation detection equipment. So, arrangements were made to fly all types of aircraft over the area with their radar in operation. Nothing unusual happened. All possible types of airborne research equipment were traced during similar flights in the hope that some special equipment not normally carried in aircraft would be found to have caused the jump in radiation. But nothing out of the ordinary occurred during these tests either. It was tentatively concluded, the scientist continued, that the abnormally high radiation readings were official and that the objects sighted visually were birds or airplanes. A report to this effect was made to military authorities, but since the conclusion stated that no flying saucers were involved, the report went into some unknown file. Project Blue Book never got it. Shortly after the second UFO radiation episode, the research group finished its work. It was at this time that the scientist had first become aware of the incidents he related to me. A friend of his, one of the men involved in the sightings, had sent the details in a letter. As the story of the sightings spread, it was widely discussed in scientific circles, with the result that the conclusion, an equipment malfunction, began to be more seriously questioned. Among the scientists who felt that further investigation of such phenomena was in order were the man to whom I was talking and some of the people who had made the original sightings. About a year later, the scientist and these original investigators were working together. They decided to make a few more tests on their own time, but with radiation detection equipment so designed that the possibility of malfunction would be almost nil. They formed a group of people who were interested in the project, and on evenings and weekends assembled and set up their equipment in an abandoned building on a small mountain peak. To ensure privacy and to avoid arousing undue interest among people not in on the project, the scientist and his colleagues told everyone that they had formed a mineral club. The Mineral Club deception covered their weekend expeditions because rockhounds are notorious for their addiction to scrambling around on mountains in search for specimens. The equipment that the group had installed in the abandoned building was designed to be self-operating. Geiger tubes were arranged in a pattern so that some idea as to the direction of the radiation source could be obtained. During the original sightings, the equipment malfunction factor could not be definitely established or refuted because certain critical data had not been measured. To get data on visual sightings, the Mineral Club had to rely on the flying saucer grapevine, which exists at every major scientific laboratory in the country. By late summer of 1950, they were in business. For the next 3 months, the scientist and his group kept their radiation equipment operating 24 hours a day, but the tapes showed nothing except the usual background activity. The saucer grapevine reported sightings in the general area of the tests, but none close to the instrumented mountaintop. The trip to the instrument shack, which had to be made every 2 days to change tapes, began to get tiresome for the rockhounds, and there was some talk of discontinuing the watch. But persistence paid off. Early in December, about 10 o'clock in the morning, the grapevine reported sightings of a silvery, circular-shaped object near the instrument shack. The UFO was seen by several people. When the rockhounds checked the recording tapes in the shack, they found that several of the Geiger tubes had been triggered at 10:17 a.m. The registered radiation increase was about 100 times greater than the normal background activity. 3 more times during the next 2 months, the Mineral Club's equipment recorded abnormal radiation on occasions when the grapevine reported visual sightings of UFOs. One of the visual sightings was substantiated by radar. After these incidents, the Mineral Club kept its instruments in operation until June 1951, but nothing more was recorded. And curiously enough, during this period while the radiation level remained normal, the visual sightings in the area dropped off too. The Mineral Club decided to concentrate on determining the significance of the data they had obtained. Accordingly, the scientist and the group made a detailed study